still the contract doesn't say, it does not specify the asset, would still not be leased.
Hold on, it's not going to be leased, but they're only going to serve you. That means that you are controlling all of its assets.
No, but the company has different assets elsewhere.
Okay, then that part, if you are not going to specify what are you going to use, then it's not going to be a lease at the end of the day. I know it's very nice, but be careful, that's not the final standard. That's one of the biggest challenges. This is one of the biggest things that they are keep challenging.
So how will the transition be done? Let's say, for example, you used it before and then,
Yeah, you don't have to. You have derecognition. Okay? That's actually a bad news. Derecognition. Well, the liability will also. Now, definition of the lease. Identified assets, substitution rights. Let's see what are we going to do. A contract may give the supplier a right to fulfill its obligation using an alternative asset. If a substantive substitution right exists, the underlying asset would not be an identified one. So if they can change it without, any typical burden or any typical constraint, then it's not going to be an identified asset. Substitution right could be substantively both met. Supplier can substitute without the customer consent, and no barriers to prevent this. Okay? Now, a nominal warranty or replacement is, of course, not going to work like this. So, substitution means no lease, but it has to be substantive right. Now, let's see what do I mean by that. Two scenarios are listed over here. Now, the first scenario is this. That is the case. The customer contracts for data storage throughout to a centralized data center involving the use of a specified server. Okay, hold on for a second. So far, I have specified asset. So it looks like a lease. Let's go further. The supplier has the ability to substitute another server without the customer consent. Let's see the first one. Supplier has many identical servers maintained in the central accessible location. Right? And also, I know that there are no barriers for substitution, so they can just change it around. Is it going to be a lease? No, this is not going to be a lease. Why? Because the substitution right is going to be substantive. Okay? So there is no identified asset there, because you can just change it anytime. Do you have to change it? No, you don't. You just need to have the right to change it. Okay, let's go to the second one. Server is customized. Alright? I have lots of identical servers, but this one is going to be customized very much. Okay? Substitution would require the supplier to incur lots of costs to remove significant asset components containing customers' confidential data. Now, in this case, it is not going to be a material substitution right. Why? Because actually, economic and operational barriers do exist. Because in order to substitute, first I need to revert basically everything. So is this going to be a lease? Yes, that is going to be a lease. Alright, because there is no substitution. Now, let's go to the third thing. Definition of lease. Customer's ability to direct the use. Okay, tell me please, what do we mean by directing the use? Directing the use means that the asset will do whatever I want the asset to do. That is meant by directing the use. Now, let's go and let's see how are we going to deal with it. Ability to make decisions about the assets used the most significantly affect economic benefits derived from the use of the asset throughout the contractor will include, for example, how the asset is operated, purpose for which the asset is employed, who operates the asset, right? This is pretty straightforward. So these are the things that we need to look at. Okay, now let's go and let's see the following example. Actually, this example is coming from one of my clients. I don't know if you have this, but we have this a lot. If you have an industry which requires a lot of energy, and you you guys won't have this because you guys have a lot too much energy, right? No, because is it still true that you are selling electricity for free for people who are actually living here? You still have the free electricity? For everybody? No? Okay, because actually during, winter is coming for us and we are not very good friends now in Russia. So now we are getting ready for what? For the heating period. And we are buying gas from them. Why? Because that's the only pipeline we have to Europe, okay? So currently we are kind of thinking about what? We are kind of thinking about the use of electricity. So now the economy is starting to do what? Now the economy is starting to, shift the electricity from the actual industrial use to the public use because we are afraid that we are all going to freeze to that. So actually, just imagine what is freezing to that. If you go and take a walk here in Qatar, the opposite of that is going to be freezing to that. You guys have the problem of too much heat, we have the problem of too much cold. Bird is not fair, right? Now, let's go over here. This is very common. The customer contracts to purchase substantially all of the energy produced by a new power plant for 20 years. Okay. Power plant. Is the power plant going to have more or less the same assets throughout the lifetime? Yes. So if it has more or less the same assets throughout the lifetime, is it going to be identified? Yes, because it is not changing rapidly. If you put down a power plant, it is going to be basically the same. What is not going to be there? What you have to change because of operational reasons, but as I told you, that's not going to be substitution, right? The replacement of these kind of technological things. Now let's go over here. The supplier and customer were involved in the design of the plant before the construction, and the customer has the right to operate and maintain the plant, to appoint another or to find another party to do so. So basically, who is deciding about all the operational aspects? The one who is buying. So is it going to be a lease? Yes. Why? Because I am able to direct the use, given that the assets are more or less fixed within the plant. So it not keep changing. Okay, let's go to the next one. Supplier designed and completed construction of the plant well in advance of the contract. So basically I sold the capacity later. Okay? The supplier determines how to operate and maintain the plant. Customer and supplier agree to maintenance schedule before contract commences. Is it going to be a direct use? No. Why? Because basically the main decisions regarding the operational issues are going to be decided by who? By the supplier. So is it going to be a lease? No, because although I have identified assets, that's not enough. What else do I need? The ability to use and direct the use. And here I don't have the direct. That was IFRIC 4. Yes, that if you purchase the capacity with the indefeasible right of use. What is that indefeasible right of use? You signed it, and they couldn't take it away from you. That was very common. That in this case, yes, it would qualify as a lease. Now, these things may change.
But still, if the asset is belonging to the IPP, but the decision of the maintenance
is by them, then it's not a lease anymore. Okay? So IFRIC 4 is basically redesigned. It's totally redesigned because you need to have identified assets, no changes, and you need to have the ability to direct the use. Both of them are strict rules.
So you don't have the previous full economic,
No. No matter how many times you guys are asking, IFRIC 4 is not there anymore, according to this. Yeah, I know that this is weird, but this is the change. So they have to have the identified asset, and dive in. Okay. Now, this is what I'm saying, actually this is what I wrote over here because I was ready for these type of questions you guys are asking me now. In some cases, such as when the customer obtains substantially all of the output, this is what you guys are mentioning. Okay? The underlying asset contracts may meet today's control criteria even if the customer do not have any right to direct their use. The ED focuses on control. Certain arrangements are accounted for as leases today would no longer be considered as lease contracts. Okay? They are going to be just some take and lay contracts. Alright? Okay. So that's the rule regarding the definition of the lease. Okay. So what is the next one? Oh, that's also very nice. Look. Assume the customer contracts for the use of a specialized medical equipment. Alright? Customer's personnel will operate the equipment at its location. Equipment can only be operated in conjunction with a disposable consumable product. Customer is contractually required to purchase the consumable from the supplier. The consumable is available from other suppliers and the supplier sells the consumable to customers that do not lease equipment from the supplier. Question. Can I derive benefits on its own? Yes, you can actually do that. Why? Although you are contractually required to buy the consumers from them, can I derive the benefits alone from the machine? Yes, although contractually I am obliged to do what? To buy it from them. Is it still going to be a lease? Yes, it's still going to be a lease, even if the contracts require me to buy certain items from the original store.
Would you also change if the second one was done by the supplier?
Customer personnel will operate the equipment. Instead of that, that would be again a capacity arrangement. If I tell, because that's a capacity arrangement, what you are talking about. If you are the one who can tell the supplier how to operate the machine in details, then the answer would not change. And most probably, in case of a medical equipment, it does matter who you are x-raying. I cannot just x-ray anybody. Okay? Cancelable leases. Now, that's also very important, and this is going to be very familiar from yesterday's topic. If a lease is cancelable, okay, so if it's not enforceable, then actually what we are going to say that this is not a lease. So a lease is something what cannot be cancelled without any consequence. Okay, that's actually the same thing what we have today. Okay. Now, let's go and let's see the leases. What type of leases do you know today? Finance and operating lease. Now it's time to forget these. You are going to have three types of leases. Actually, the first type is not really a lease. We are going to have the short-term lease. We are going to have the type A lease. And we are going to have the type B lease. Now let's start with the short-term lease. The short-term lease has a very strict definition. Short-term lease are lease which period is 12 months or less. It's not judgmental. 12 months period, including any optional renewable periods. Take a look at this. I made 9 months here, but I have an option to renew it with further 4. How much is it altogether? 13. That's not short term. I have 9 months, and plus the 1 month period, that is going to be short term. So the 12-month rule is extremely strict. Okay? Now, what I am going to do with the short-term leases? Well, there is going to be an accounting policy election, but that's not the important one. That's the important one. No lease assets or lease liability recognized. So nothing. But what you are going to do, recognize lease payments in profit or loss on straight line basis over the lease term, and lessor, so whoever gives you the asset, could use another systematic basis if more representative of income earned. So basically, this is what, ladies and gentlemen? That's the operating lease, basically, right? The only thing that you need to take a look at, that operating lease cannot exceed what? 12 months, and they are not called operating lease anymore, right? Why do they not call it operating lease? In order to not to have a mix-up in the mind, okay? So that's the first lease. Please remember, very strict rule. Any lease which contains a possible purchase, no matter if it's bargain purchase or not, is not going to be treated as short term. So every lease which has a purchase option in it, it doesn't have to be bargain purchase. So not only the bargain purchases, it's not going to be a short term. So for those, you need to decide if they are type A or type B leases. That's not hard, right? Now the next one, what I need to talk about, is going to be the separating the components of the contract. This must be familiar for you guys from yesterday, when we were talking about the revenues. Please note that if the contract meets the definition of the lease, okay, and contains a right to use multiple underlying assets, then determining the right to use an asset is a separate lease component of the contract. Okay? So, what does it mean? You lease out the whole factory. It's sure that nothing is going to change in there. Typical example. You lease out 2 buildings at the same time. Are they going to change? It's not very possible, right? Okay. So are they going to be leases? Yes, because we have identified assets. Now, how many leases do I have? Okay, we need to see if both of them meet the definition of lease, or only they meet the definition of lease together. Okay? A right to use an asset is a separate lease component if both of the following criteria is met. Look. Lease can benefit from use of the asset either on its own or together with other readily available resources. Careful. The readily available resource does not mean that the other asset that I'm leasing at the same time. Because if I can only use them together, how much lease is that? Then it's going to be 1, right? But if I'm leasing an asset, 2 assets, and one of them can be used with one asset of mine, the other asset can be used with another asset of mine, that is going to be 2 leases, not 1. 2 leases. Right, okay. Underlying asset is neither dependent on nor highly interrelated with the other asset in the contract. So basically, this is what I said earlier, that the 2 assets are basically, I can cut into 2. Here is an example. I like this example a lot. This actually is explaining what the heck you need to do with separation. Remember this one. That's a good one. Lessee enters into the lease of a warehouse with the surrounding parking spaces to be used for deliveries and transport. The lessee is a trucking company that intends to use the warehouse as the hub for its shipping operations. Okay, now, don't read. Try to think. 1 or 2. It looks 2, right? But without the parking space, I cannot be a hub. So how many leases is that? It's going to be 1 lease. You understand? That's actually a really, really nice example. Typical example that I had as a question, a few weeks ago. If you lease out from a company separately an airport, and you lease out separately the gates, you know the gates, these things what you use in order to enter to the plane and exit from the plane. Is it going to be 1 or 2 leases? 1. Hold on. Next question. What if one company owns the land and the other company owns the gates? Is it? Can you use them without each other? Right. Actually, I have the answer now. Actually, it's going to be 1 lease, right? I get the answer from one of the members of the IASB board. They were telling me that this intended to be 1 lease, but actually there is no explicit guidance on this. That what is happening if I'm leasing different items from different customers, which can together. That's an issue. That's an issue, and it's not regulated yet. Okay? Good. Now, definition of a lease. Accounting for a lease and non-lease components. Now, allocate contract consideration between each lease and non-lease components. We are going to tell you how, okay, just in a minute. Now, lease component, each lease component would be the subject of this standard, and the non-lease components for maintenance and training. Lessee would follow executory contract accounting, or lessor would follow the proposed revenue recognition standard. Let me explain you what I mean. Can it happen that I lease out a building from you, not a building, that's not, I lease a machine from you. And with the machine lease, I also paid you to train me how to operate this machine. Now, and I'm paying only one fee, right? How many performance obligations do you have in there? Oh, from yesterday you should know. 2. Hold on, when do I have to? If that machine is very specific, and only one person can tell me how to operate it, then it's going to be even than 2, because if it's customary that the other party sells it separately, can be distinct, and it is distinct, then what is going to happen? It's going to be 2 performance obligations. Okay? Don't forget yesterday's night. Okay, well let's see how are we going to allocate this. Lessee allocation. Relative standalone price basis if an observable price for each component exists. Hold! Hold! This is exactly like what? It's almost like the rules in IFRS 15. Standalone price split. Okay? So get familiar with that guy. Residual method when observable price doesn't exist, and as a single lease component if there is no observable standalone price for any component. Okay? Now, so basically, guys, look. Use IFRS 15 rules. Or if everything fails, take the whole thing as being 1. Okay? So this is what they are basically saying over here. What is the lessor going to say? Always allocate using the revenue recognition standard. Why? Because for the lessor, it's going to be, of course, a revenue. So for them, it's easy to use that. And for the lessee, they say, use like if it was revenue. For you, it's not a revenue. Of course, it's going to be an expense, but do as if it was a revenue. Yeah, I just put something over here what you might want to do if you have a lease. The standalone price, if you have several components in the same contract, is very judgmental, right? So it's very judgmental. So you have to be careful because it is going to make a huge impact. Yeah, modifications. Contract modifications are going to have the same problem like what we had in the revenues. What were the problems that we had in the revenues? If the modification is going to give you a new contract, or the modification is going to turn it, and it's going to be a real modification, so you actually go home to the current contract and you are going to adjust the figures. Let's see what is the rule. The modification is going to be any change to the contract and the conditions of the lease that was not part of the original terms of the lease. Fine. Lease modification is accounted for as a separate new lease by both lessor and lessee when both of the following conditions are met. First, the modification grants the lessee an additional right of use not included in the original lease. So basically, there is a new asset what we are giving away. Secondly, the additional right of use is priced, which is in line with the standalone prices. If this is true, then it's going to be 2 separate leases. I have a question. Let's assume I'm leasing aircraft, okay? I lease one aircraft for 1 million currency unit a month. Okay. I lease a second one, I modify the contract, and now the contract is saying I lease a second one, but the price of it is going to be 950. Is it 1 contract or 2 contracts? Why? But it's only 950. Again, what is that? What we studied yesterday, that if the price of of the second deal is the same, then there is no question. But if it's a bit less, is it going to reflect the standalone price? Yes, because I might give marketing efforts or some type of discount for the second one. What if I'm saying that the next airplane is 500 currency units only? That is going to be 1 lease. Guys, the second price will not be in line with the standalone prices. Okay? Of course, huh?
But there are two assets identified. Two assets which are specifically identified.
Yes, both of them are specifically identified.
So you have two
leases, but hold on, two assets, but actually the price, one of them will be 100, the other one will be 500, so how much is going to be? 750? 750, so that's going to be two leases, but it's not a new lease, it's a contract modification. Okay? Of course, this example was extreme. I should have said, I leased 10 for 1,000 and then I leased the 11 for 500 because nobody would give that much of a discount for the second plane. Right? Okay. Good. Now the key concepts. The key terms. The non-cancelable period for the lease is going to be the following. Whichever is non-cancelable and periods covered by an option to extend the lease if the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise. So, hold on, it means that now the non-cancelable period in the new standard is more. Right? Because you don't have to be virtually certain, but you need to be only reasonably certain to extend. So if you have an extension option, the lease term is going to be based on that. I will show you an example in a minute. What do I mean? Let's go and let's see the next one. Periods covered by an option to terminate the lease if the lease is reasonably certain not to exercise. Okay, so periods covered by an option to terminate. So until termination, this is going to be the next one. There are some things that you need to consider, but these are very straightforward. So even without me writing it over there, you would know what would you consider. Renewal price rate, bargains, penalty payments, that's the only one maybe which is not straightforward. Economical penalties, what is that? If I stop my lease, then I will be in a situation that maybe I am not going to be able to go on with my operations, right? Now, and the stop lease term that extends beyond the non-cancelable period of the license. Here is a scenario that you might want to take a look at. Okay. The property lease includes a non-cancelable term of 4 years and the 2 years lessee renewal option and no termination penalties. Okay. What is a termination penalty, guys? If you terminate the lease, no. Sometimes even when it expires, you have to pay a penalty. Sometimes you have this, okay? But usually before, of course, that's very common. Now there are two possibilities. Hold on. No termination penalty or other contract asset, entity, or market-based factors indicating significant economic incentives to renew exist. Then how much is going to be your lease term? You are not going to renew this. So how much is the lease term? 4 years. Even though that you have the 2 years option, even that, because nothing is saying that you are actually going to use the 2 years option. Okay? Hold on, previously, could we consider the additional 2 years? Yes, but only if it was certain. Well, not certain, but virtually certain. Okay, it was almost like virtually certain. Let's go to the next one. Lessee pays for significant leasehold improvements. LHIs. Okay? LHI is expected to have significant value at the end of the 4 years. The value can only be realized through continued occupancy of the property. Let me give you a real-life example for that. One of my clients rented in a 5, actually it's a 6-star hotel, a place. And they made a very posh restaurant in it. Now, if you rent a place within a hotel to do a very posh restaurant, what is the first thing that you are going to put into that place? You are going to put in your kitchen. Is the kitchen going to be there already? No. Who is going to pay for the kitchen? You. Now let's say that you sign for 2 years. 4.